All right, today we're going to get into this really powerful story of personal transformation. It's a journey from, the super rigid rules of religion to this profound inner awakening. It really shows how sometimes you have to let go of absolutely everything you think you know to find the truth that was hiding in plain sight the whole time.
And this quote from Neville Goddard, man, it just perfectly sets the stage for the story we're about to explore. It's all about this really radical act of surrender. Giving up who you think you are so you can finally become who you were always meant to be. This idea, it's the absolute heart of this entire journey.
So let's get into the story of our author, Doug. What's so interesting is that his spiritual journey didn't kick off in a church or with some strict religious upbringing. Nope. It all began with a moment of simple, profound discovery when he was just a young man.
He was at a youth event, and suddenly he had this overwhelming realization. It wasn't about earning your worth or following a bunch of rules. It was just this simple, beautiful understanding that a divine essence was already inside of him. And in that moment, that feeling was completely and totally enough. But, as you can probably guess, that beautiful simplicity, well, it wasn't going to last.
Okay, so this is where everything starts to change. That initial feeling of peace and rest, it just gets gradually replaced by a life of religious duty. Faith stopped being this thing of wonder and became all about work, struggle, and performance.
This slide just lays it out so clearly. I mean, look at the contrast here. On the left, you have that initial belief, wonder, rest, it was enough. And then look at what it turned into on the right, struggle, performance, and that constant nagging feeling of not enough. It's a total shift from grace to a never-ending grind. And this gives you a peek inside his head for 3 whole decades. It was this constant cycle of self-judgment and striving. No matter what he did, there was always that voice telling him to do more, be better, that his struggles were somehow his own fault. You can just feel how crushing that weight must have been. And here we get to the core metaphor of his entire journey. That initial, beautiful realization was like a seed planted inside him. But 30 years of religious striving, of trying to earn something he already had, wasn't helping it grow. It was doing the exact opposite. It was slowly choking the life out of it. So you have these 3 decades of struggle, and then his entire world and the belief system he'd built his life around, it just began to crumble. A period of absolutely immense personal loss, forced a crisis that he just couldn't ignore anymore. Just look at this timeline. The succession of tragedies is just devastating. I mean, in a few short years, he loses his sister, his father, and a close friend. For someone who had dedicated his whole life to serving God, this kind of relentless loss was completely and totally incomprehensible. And this was the result. The grief, the confusion, it all turned into anger. He felt completely abandoned by the God he'd spent his entire life trying to please. So he made a decision. He just flipped a switch and walked away from all of it. He was done. But even after walking away, even with all that anger, there was still this deep yearning for meaning that just wouldn't go away. He knew he couldn't go back to his old beliefs, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be something more. And so began this reluctant, but really open-minded search for answers in totally new places. In this Einstein quote, it's the perfect mindset for what comes next. He knew, deep down, that he couldn't fix this crisis using the same religious logic that had gotten him there in the first place. He needed a fundamentally different perspective on life, on God, on everything.
So where does this search take him? To the book and movie The Secret, which is all about the law of attraction. Now, his religious conditioning was screaming that this was dark, forbidden stuff. But despite that, the ideas just resonated with him on this deep, intuitive level. It didn't feel like a belief system. It felt more like a fundamental law of the universe, just like gravity.
Okay, so this is the real catalyst, the big turning point. It wasn't just the law of attraction in general, but a specific practice he found in another book by Rhonda Byrne called The Magic. And the central practice? Gratitude. This, he realized, was the key to unlocking absolutely everything.
So how does this actually work? Well, there's a neurological component to it. Our brains have this thing called the reticular activating system, or RAS. The easiest way to think of it is like a filter, or maybe like the algorithm for your brain. It's constantly scanning your environment and showing you evidence that confirms what you already believe. So if you believe the world is full of lack,
That's literally all your brain will let you see.
And the process to change it is actually pretty straightforward. You start with your current belief. In his case, it was built on fear and judgment. Then you intentionally, consciously practice a new feeling, like gratitude. Over time, this practice literally retrains your brain's filter, your RAS. And as your filter shifts, you begin to perceive a whole new reality, one that's filled with abundance and possibility.
And this is the whole point, right? Gratitude changed his inner environment. Let's go back to that central metaphor. If his heart was hard, packed down soil from years of anxiety and striving, then gratitude was the water that softened it all up. It created the perfect conditions for that seed of divinity, the one that had been there all along, to finally break through and grow. So this all leads him to this brand new, integrated understanding of everything. He realized that true faith isn't about striving to please some external, far-off God. It's about turning inward and nurturing the divine potential that already exists right inside of you.
This was a massive realization for him. He realized he didn't have to throw out his spiritual path or the figure of Jesus. The problem was never the path itself, but the distorted lens he'd been given to see it through, a lens of fear, guilt, and performance. Once he took off those dirty glasses, everything became clear.
And with that new clarity, he could finally see what had been there the whole time. It wasn't a list of rules he had to follow, but these inherent seeds just waiting to be nurtured. Seeds of freedom, seeds of identity, seeds of truth, seeds of divine possibility. You see, religion had taught him that he was empty and needed to be filled, but he discovered he had everything he needed inside him from the very beginning.
And that really brings us to a question for you to think about. After hearing this story, what do you think? Is freedom something you have to work for, something you have to earn and prove yourself worthy of? Or is it something that's already part of your core identity, just waiting for you to remember it?
Because ultimately, that's the profound takeaway from his story. The spiritual journey isn't a quest to go find what you're missing or fix what's broken. It's a journey of perception, of learning to clear away all the noise and the false beliefs so you can finally see and then live from the truth of what is already yours.